our guest today, Patience Strong. Good afternoon, Miss Strong.
Good afternoon.
Now, as we saw, Winifred May wrote Jealousy, but you were Winifred May in those days.
Yes.
Early 30s?
Yes. And I'd been writing, well, since my childhood. I had my first little poem published in a local paper when I was about 10. And I used to write for magazines. And there were so many magazines in those days. And I think I had my first published when I was about 13 in Nash's. And I'm so sorry for young writers now because there's no scope. They're all a monopoly sort of thing. And
but then you chose a rather tough vocation for a young woman, I would think almost a girl then, to become a songwriter in Tin Pan Alley.
Oh, but I was writing concert platform ballads, as we used to call them, before I went to Tin Pan Alley. You see, my first song was published when I was 15 by Keith Prowse, To Sing a While, and I had about 100 ballads published, you see. Give Me a Lonely Caravan, Eric Coates, Rise Up and Reach the Stars, Montague Phillips, Spring is a Lovely Lady, and all those sort of ballads that were published in those days at 2 shillings each.
Did you have to go up and down Archer Street as Tin Pan Alley in Soho
Yes.
in London with that little bag actually trying to sell those songs? I mean, how do you
yes.
sell a song? Can we see the bag? It's the original one, isn't it?
Oh yes, it was my music case given to me on my 7th birthday. And it's done good service. But
What I'm trying to find is, how do you sell a song? Do you walk in, knock on a door and say, I'm going to sing you a song?
well, no, it's not so simple as that. It's all sort of wheels within wheels. You see, when ballads ceased to be popular, I was asked to write a song for Santa Scasani and Josie Leonard, who were dancers in those days, and they were giving an exhibition dance at Olympia and wanted a song, and they asked me to write Cheerio. So that was my introduction. And then I was introduced to Lawrence Wright in a roundabout way by Jay Whitten, with whom I wrote several songs, Ninette. And then after that I was under contract with Lawrence Wright, and I wrote solely for him, you see.
I would think, though, that during that songwriting period, one of, well, probably the proudest moment was when you were asked to write a special song for the then Princess Elizabeth.
Yes, yes, I was thrilled over that.
What was the occasion?
Well, I wasn't asked to do it, I suggested it, you see, and they were all very keen on the idea.
What year was it, and what was the occasion?
It was in 1930, and the King and Queen, George V and Queen Mary, were in the royal box at the Royal Command performance, and I wrote this with Richard Crean, who was the musical director of the Palladium, and it was performed by the maestro singers in the interval. And we didn't realise, of course, then that one day she would be queen, because it was naturally before the abdication. And it's wonderful when you think that the great destiny of that child of 4 that was before her, that she was to be crowned queen of the greatest empire that's ever been known, and to bear that great responsibility. It's marvellous, really, that of all that she had to do and what she stood for in the days, especially since in the last few years when everything has changed and become so different.
Well, can we stay in a nostalgic vein for a while? Go back to wartime years. And you've said that in a strange way, they were not only the most important years of your life, but the happiest years. Why was that?
During the war, you mean?
Yes.
Well, they were the busiest years, of course, but I realised then that, in the first place, I used to write verses on natural subjects and philosophy and the beauty of nature and various things, but it became more of a mission in the war because, you see...
A mission?
Yes, because I had hundreds of letters, all of whom I dealt with, of which I dealt with myself, and from husbands and wives and sweethearts and brothers from the forces, you see. And they used to write to me with their troubles and ask me to send them cuttings from
poems.
Yes, from the newspaper, you see. And in that way I made up many a broken marriage and brought many couples together. And I think I did something in my small way to boost the morale of the people at the front.
I was just going to say, you became the Vera Lynn of the printed word.
Yes.
Didn't you? Was that the first time you realized that your poems could really help people? Was that the first time that you realized through those letters how important your work was to some people?
Yes, before I was writing for my own pleasure, just for the joy of writing. But I realized then that there was some special reason, because I believe that we're sort of led to do the right job in life, the thing for which we're fitted, and that's how circumstances work out.
Do you have any idea, Miss Strong, how many poems you have written? I know there are 30 volumes of poetry in publication. We've only got some of them here, but we were trying to work it out before the program, and our arithmetic isn't very good, is it?
Tell you that. No, neither is mine.
We got up to 50,000, and then we sort of gave up. But over 50,000 poems. Now, are these the work of inspiration or of discipline? 50,000 poems.
Well, inspiration and discipline. I mean, I keep office hours, but the inspiration is there. It's already written for me. I just have to go to the typewriter and start, and it's there.
Now, when people say this, and they talk about their hidden muse, it sounds to me almost like an automaton who sits down and goes, or handwrites, and writes a poem, and it's not theirs, it comes from outside.
Well, maybe something mediumistic about it, I don't know. But that's the inspiration.
Do you feel it's coming from outside or from within yourself?
Well, partly within myself. I mean, that inspiration doesn't come unless you're ready for it, unless you're in tune with whatever power it is that you're drawing upon for inspiration.
Now, if the, well, of course, there are going to be many, many histories, literary histories of the 20th century written, where do you think you'd be ranked by some future literary critic or historian?
Well, it depends which things of mine they read. I mean, there are the little verses that just to comfort people, and then I've written a book about a doctor, and I wrote a reply to the Bishop of Woolwich.
But it's surely your poetry upon which your reputation stands, falls, will stand, or will fall.
Yes, I suppose so, but I'm very keen on writing prose books.
Well, having read a great deal of your poetry, and having read one of your prose books, which is called Life is for Living, you also call it practical psychology, but in fact I think it is your philosophy of life.
Yes.
I realize that all your later poems have been based upon the beliefs that are in this book.
Yes.
Now, a critic would say that these beliefs are cliches.
Yes.
An admirer would say all cliches are based upon eternal truth.
Yes.
You do believe that everything is for the best.
Yes.
God moves in mysterious ways.
Yes, if we wait for that guidance, and if we believe that it is so, and if we believe that everything that happens to us is happened because it must do.
Now, you call it practical psychology. What practical help could you give people to reach this kind of level of radiant goodness that you seem to believe we're all capable of?
Well, I think
harmony, you call it, harmony.
Harmony, yes. Well, I think that it's in the subconscious mind, and if you can re-educate the subconscious mind by thinking only positive thoughts, and of course religious beliefs, but that's all tied up with it, that eventually is expressed in the objective mind, and it moulds the circumstances to which you are drawn.
But before one can re-educate the subconscious mind, you have to have a pretty strong conscious mind. Who re-educates your conscious mind for you before you can re-educate your subconscious mind? I think that's too complex
yes,
for you.
You do
You know
it
what
with
I
the
mean, don't
objective
you?
mind, you see. By reiteration of these truths, you see, that in which you believe.
And one of the fascinating things in this book is where you say, again, it's a truism or a cliche, your face, you deserve the face you have.
Well, I do think that is true, because I think that mind is master, as I say in that book. I mean, your mind controls circumstances, and our physical organisms are all controlled by the mind.
I know you are a Christian. Are you a Christian Scientist?
I was a Christian Scientist.
Oh, you were, I didn't know.
Yes, for 10 years. But I joined the Church of England when I came to know about the British Israel movement, because that's a logical sort of conclusion.
Well, if you could take us slowly,
Yes.
step by step, through your logic. I don't see the logic myself yet.
I may have left the Christian Scientist Church, but I still believe in its principles.
Which are, to remind
Which
people?
are that mind controls the body. And if you believe that God is in control, and that we were made in His image and likeness, and therefore we are potentially healthy and perfect physically.
If someone told you you had diabetes, would you refuse insulin then?
Well, no, that was one of the reasons why I left Christian Science. But I believe in the principle of the mind over matter.
Of potential perfection?
Yes.
Well then, what is illness and death?
Well, it's a belief. It's a false belief, because it isn't connected with reality.
Illness and death are not real?
Not really. If you think of the only reality is God, the only reality in life, well then everything else belongs to the phantasms of mortal mind.
Do you find that this attitude can help your ordinary readers?
Oh yes, it's constructive.
You mentioned
constructive.
You mentioned the British Israelite movement. I know that it's a longer title than that, but let's just call it the British Israelite movement for...
Yes, well, you see, it's very, very deeply interesting. There's a lifetime of research goes into it all, but it is based on the belief that we, the Anglo-Celto-Saxon nations, are descended from the original Israelites. But that has nothing to do with the Jews, and it's nothing to do with the Israelis in what is now called Israel. Because the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah was separated in BC 975.
This is in the Old Testament,
Yes,
actually, isn't
definitely,
it?
yes. It's all based on the Old Testament, which I believe in literally. I'm that old-fashioned word called fundamentalist.
So you look upon the Bible as a history rather than
it is. It's the history of Israel.
It's not just a source of religious
No,
comfort
it's
to
the
you.
history of Israel.
So, no, we've split you say
Yes.
the tribes were split up
Yes.
and became the English-speaking
And they were
peoples?
lost to history, according to the historian Josephus. But they migrated in waves across Europe, leaving the stone circles as their marks of identity. And they were destined for these isles.
Why?
Why? Because it was all in prophecy.
Whose?
Well, Samuel's. I will appoint a place for my people Israel, never more to be moved and afflicted by the children of wickedness. But it was not only these isles, it was the coastal fringes, Scandinavia, part of the coastal fringe, And because the promises, because in our history, and in our history alone, are fulfilled the promises made to Abraham, that we should be a nation and a company of nations, and in us all the families of the earth should be blessed.
These are English-speaking nations,
Yes.
are they? Only England, Scotland, Ireland and the Commonwealth?
Yes, and the coronation stone and the pyramid, but the coronation stone in particular, is a substantial evidence of this, because you see that came to us from Scone and Ireland, Tara, Spain, and from the place where Jacob had his dream of the angels ascending and descending. That was where the promise was made, that this stone was the house of God, and it is now in Westminster Abbey. And it's written on the stone, but nobody bothers to read it. And there are the iron rings let into it, you see. And all our kings and queens have been crowned. All the kings and queens of Israel have been crowned on this stone, because we are the Davidic throne. That's why our throne will stand whatever happens. I know everything is crumbling around us now at the moment, but the throne will stand.
See, I noticed when you said to think that little child, the 4-year-old
Yes.
Princess Elizabeth, you said
Yes.
her destiny,
Yes.
and I noticed you said it with such fierce
Yes.
passion,
Yes.
so that the destiny, you feel,
Yes.
of the royal blood
Yes.
comes from
Yes.
who?
They're more or less caretakers.
But I mean, if you look at the history of the royal family, it seems so confused because they're basically German.
No, there's a chart that hangs in Windsor Castle. I think it's still there, tracing the descent of the Queen from King David.
The Bible's King David.
Yes, King David.
So that through all these apparent strange marriages between Greek families and German
Yes.
families and
Yes.
English families
Yes.
and French
Yes.
families and
Yes.
Dutch kings who
Yes.
became kings,
Yes.
they're all descended from.
Yes.
Now, the other thing that informs all your poetry, aside from your religious beliefs, is this very fierce patriotism, love of country. Is this only because of your belief in the British Israelite movement, or is it something that you were born with?
No, I was always very patriotic, always, because I was a child when the First World War was and my father went to the war, and I was always imbued with this spirit of patriotism. I was proud of being English. We used to keep Empire Day and go to school waving little Union Jacks with red, white and blue hair ribbon in our hair. And it's not a bad thing to be.
Proud of your country. And you love, I would say, perhaps one third of your programs, poetry, is about the countryside itself.
Yes, and the spirit of England and all that's best in it.
But you love the country, don't you?
Oh yes, yes, I love the country.
So when you look around you now and you see cynicism and bitterness, do you still have faith in our future, a certain grandeur in the future for Great Britain?
No, I think we're coming under judgment because we haven't been true to our ideals. And we've turned from the faith of our fathers. And there's so much introduced into this country now, including immigration and things that militate against the things for which we stand, that I don't know.
Well, let us not end on a
Yes.
negative note, because
No.
you're a poet noted for her optimism in life.
Yes.
Can I add, Miss Strong? Because
I think it does.
I just wanted to give you
Yes.
one more chance, because when you said that you felt rather negative about England today, if you look ahead to the next century, have you got no optimism left?
Oh yes,
One
because-
small message of hope for everyone
because
watching.
Our Lord himself said in Matthew's Gospel, "When ye see these things come to pass, lift up your hearts, for your redemption draweth nigh."
Thank you, Patience Strong. Thank you very much.